Before you hear this story, forget everything you think you know about cults. Forget the movies, forget the headlines. Forget the idea that only foolish people could ever follow someone into darkness. Because the people you're about to meet were not stupid. They were teachers, nurses, veterans, mothers, fathers, grandparents, people who wanted exactly the same things most of us want. A place to belong, a community that cared, a future that felt better than the world they were living in. And because of that hope, 918 people would lose their lives. Not in a war, not in a natural disaster, not at the hands of a stranger, but because of one man, a preacher, a man they loved, a man they trusted, a man who promised to build paradise. His name was Jim Jones. If you had met him during the 1950s, you probably would have admired him. He spoke passionately about equality at a time when segregation still divided America. His church welcomed black and white families under the same roof. Rich and poor sat side by side. He adopted children from different ethnic backgrounds, something almost unheard of at the time. To many people, Jim Jones looked like the future. While others preached about heaven, he promised to build it on earth. And people believed him, not because he demanded blind faith, but because, at first, he seemed to deserve it. The church was called the People's Temple. What started as a small congregation in Indiana quickly became something much bigger. Families sold their homes just to live closer to the church. Young people abandoned promising careers. Elderly members donated their life savings. Volunteers worked long hours without asking for anything in return. They weren't forced. They wanted to help. Because every Sunday, Jim Jones stood before them and spoke with absolute certainty. He told them the world was broken, that governments had failed, that racism, poverty, and injustice would only get worse. But inside the People's Temple, things would be different. Inside these walls, everyone mattered. The more people listened, the more impossible it became to imagine life without him. Jones remembered birthdays. He visited the sick. He helped struggling families pay their bills. He hugged children. He comforted grieving parents. To many members, he wasn't just their pastor. He became their closest friend, their protector, their father. And slowly, almost without anyone noticing, that was exactly what he wanted. Because behind every inspiring sermon, something darker was beginning to grow. At first, the changes were almost invisible. Members were encouraged to confess their deepest secrets during church meetings, not to God, but to Jim Jones. Every mistake, every regret, every hidden fear, everything was carefully written down, locked away inside filing cabinets. People believed these confessions would help them become better. They didn't realize they were handing someone complete control over their lives. Then came another rule. If someone questioned Jim Jones, you were expected to report them. If your husband expressed doubts, you reported him. If your wife wanted to leave, you reported her. If your parents criticized the church, even children were encouraged to tell Jim Jones what had been said at home. Little by little, trust disappeared. Everyone watched everyone else, and no one knew who might be listening. Leaving became almost impossible, not because the doors were locked, but because every friendship, every relationship, every part of life now existed inside the People's Temple. Walking away didn't just mean leaving a church. It meant leaving your family, your friends, your purpose, your entire world. And Jim Jones understood something terrifying about human nature. If you can become someone's entire world, they will do almost anything to avoid losing you. By the mid-1970s, the People's Temple had grown into one of the largest religious movements in America. Politicians wanted Jim Jones on their side. Journalists praised his work. Celebrities visited his church. Photographs of him standing beside powerful public figures covered the walls. To his followers, those pictures proved one thing: Jim Jones wasn't dangerous. He was changing the world. But behind the applause, behind the cameras, behind the smiling photographs, the man they believed was saving them had already begun planning the place where almost all of them would die. Not in America, not in a church, but deep inside a jungle, thousands of miles away, where no one could hear them scream. When Jim Jones announced that the future of the People's Temple would no longer be in America, almost nobody questioned him. By the late 1970s, criticism of the church was growing louder. Former members accused Jones of abuse. Newspapers began publishing disturbing stories. Families claimed they were being separated from loved ones. To everyone outside the temple, these were warning signs. But inside, Jim Jones told a completely different story. He said the government wanted to destroy them. He said the media was lying. He said powerful people feared what the People's Temple represented. And then, he offered a solution. We'll build our own world. Not another church, not another town, an entirely new society. A place where racism, poverty, and corruption would never exist. A paradise. Deep in the jungles of Guyana, South America. The project was called Jonestown. On paper, it sounded almost perfect. Hundreds of acres of fertile land, fresh air, farming, equality. A peaceful community where everyone would work together, far away from politics, far away from violence, far away from the America that Jim Jones claimed was collapsing. To many followers, it sounded like the dream they had spent years believing in. So they packed their lives into suitcases, said goodbye to everything they had ever known, and boarded planes heading toward South America. Many believed they were flying toward a better future. They had no idea they were flying into one of history's deadliest traps. The jungle was beautiful. Dense green forests stretched as far as the eye could see. Birds echoed through the trees. The air smelled of rain and wet earth. For the first few days, everything felt exciting. Members worked together building homes. Children laughed. People smiled. It looked exactly like the paradise Jones had promised. But paradise has a way of revealing its true face. Within weeks, reality arrived. The tropical heat was relentless. Work began before sunrise and often didn't end until after dark. People spent hours clearing jungle, growing crops, repairing buildings, digging trenches. Food became scarce. Most meals consisted of little more than rice, beans, or watery soup. Fresh meat was almost non-existent. Many people were constantly hungry, yet nobody dared complain. Leaving Jonestown wasn't simple. The settlement sat hundreds of miles from the nearest city. There were no highways, no buses, no nearby towns. Only dense rainforest, stretching endlessly in every direction. Even if someone escaped, where would they go? Most didn't even know exactly where they were, and Jim Jones made sure of that. Every morning, his voice echoed across the compound through loudspeakers. Every afternoon, his voice returned. Every evening, it was still there. Sometimes, even in the middle of the night, his speeches could last for hours. He warned of assassins, CIA agents, government conspiracies, mercenaries hiding in the jungle. He told his followers that American soldiers were preparing to invade Jonestown, that if they ever returned home, they would be tortured, their children would be taken away, their families would disappear forever. The outside world became the enemy, and fear became the walls of the prison. Soon, trust disappeared completely. Neighbors reported on neighbors. Friends secretly informed on friends. Parents watched what they said around their own children. Children were taught that Jim Jones loved them more than their own mothers and fathers. Every conversation, every disagreement, every private thought could end up on Jim Jones's desk. Nobody knew who could be trusted anymore, except one man, Jim Jones, exactly as he intended. Then came something even more disturbing. Without warning, sirens would echo through the settlement. Everyone, no matter where they were, would rush to the central pavilion. Children, elderly people, entire families. Jones would stand before them, his sunglasses hiding his eyes, and calmly announce, "This is the end." Large containers filled with a dark purple drink were brought forward. People watched in complete silence. Parents held their children. The cups were passed from hand to hand. Everyone believed this was the moment they were about to die. Then, minutes later, Jones smiled. It was only a test. He called these rehearsals white nights. They happened again and again and again. Every rehearsal taught the same lesson. When Jim Jones tells you it's time to die, you obey. Month after month, fear became routine. Obedience became instinct. And by November 1978, nearly 1,000 people had unknowingly practiced their own deaths. So many times that when the real day finally arrived, almost no one believed they still had a choice. By the autumn of 1978, the outside world had begun asking dangerous questions. Families across America were becoming desperate. Parents hadn't spoken to their sons and daughters in months. Letters from Jonestown sounded strange, short, carefully written, almost as if someone else had been watching over every word. Some families became convinced that their loved ones weren't free. Others feared something even worse, that they were already captured. Those concerns eventually reached Washington, and one man decided he wanted to see the truth with his own eyes. His name was Leo Ryan, a United States Congressman from California. Unlike most politicians, Ryan didn't want reports. He didn't want second-hand stories. He wanted to go there himself. If the people of Jonestown were truly happy, he would see it. If they weren't, he would bring them home. On November 17, 1978, Ryan landed in Guyana with a small delegation. Journalists, government staff, concerned relatives. When they finally arrived at Jonestown, everything looked normal. Children were playing, music echoed through the pavilion, people smiled. Jim Jones greeted Ryan warmly, as if he had absolutely nothing to hide. For a moment, it seems the rumors had all been wrong. Visitors were shown gardens, homes, schools, happy faces. Jones wanted the world to see paradise. But paradise was beginning to crack. That evening, something unexpected happened. As Congressman Ryan walked through the settlement, a folded piece of paper was quietly pushed into someone's hand. No one noticed, at least, not at first. When Ryan's team unfolded the note, only a few words were written on it. "Please help us get out of Jonestown." Soon, another note appeared, then another. One family quietly approached the visitors, then another. People waited until Jim Jones wasn't looking. They whispered. They looked over their shoulders. Some were shaking. For months, some of them had dreamed about this exact moment. Someone from the outside world had finally arrived. By the next morning, more than a dozen residents had made the same decision. They wanted to leave. Not next week, not next month, right now. For the first time in years, Jim Jones was losing control, and everyone could see it. His smile disappeared. Witnesses later described him as exhausted, angry, almost detached from reality. The man who once captivated thousands with hope now looked like someone watching his entire world collapse. The group prepared to leave Jonestown. Defectors climbed aboard trucks carrying only the few belongings they could grab. Some cried. Others refused to look back. No one knew if they would ever return. The convoy reached a small jungle airstrip called Port Kaituma. 2 aircraft waited on the runway. Freedom was only minutes away. Then, without warning, a tractor pulling a trailer rolled toward the planes. Inside, armed members of the People's Temple. At first, nobody understood what was happening. Then, gunfire exploded across the runway. People ran in every direction. Journalists dropped their cameras. Some tried to hide beneath the aircraft. Others threw themselves into the grass. Congressman Leo Ryan,
The man who had come to rescue them was struck again and again and again. He died beside the aircraft. 3 journalists were killed. 1 defector was murdered. Several others lay bleeding on the runway, praying the gunman would leave before finishing them. Back in Jonestown, Jim Jones received the news. There would be no negotiations now, no investigations, no second chances. The murder of a United States congressman guaranteed one thing: the world was coming. He slowly walked toward the central pavilion, picked up the microphone, and calmly gave the order. The order he had spent years preparing nearly 1,000 people to obey. Bring everyone together. This time, it wasn't another rehearsal.
As the survivors at the airstrip fought for their lives, a very different scene was unfolding back in Jonestown. The loudspeakers crackled to life. Jim Jones's voice echoed across the settlement. Everyone to the pavilion. No one panicked, no one screamed. They had heard those words before, dozens of times. They believed it was another white night, another rehearsal, another test of loyalty. Families quietly walked toward the pavilion. Parents carried sleeping children. Elderly members leaned on one another. Some still believed. When it was over, Jim Jones would smile and tell them it had all been another exercise. He never did. More than 900 people gathered beneath the wooden pavilion. Jim Jones sat in a chair, his trademark dark sunglasses hiding his eyes. His voice was calm, almost emotionless. He told them the truth, or at least his version of it. The congressman was dead. American soldiers would soon arrive. They would torture the adults, separate the children, destroy everything they had built together. There was only one way to stay free. Revolutionary suicide. He had used those words for years. Now, for the first time, they were real. Large metal containers were carried into the center of the pavilion. Inside, a purple, grape-flavored drink, mixed with cyanide, powerful sedatives, and poison strong enough to kill within minutes. The people watched in silence. Many still couldn't believe this wasn't another rehearsal. Then, Jim Jones spoke the words that changed history forever. Bring the children first. The first cries came from the infants. Mothers stood frozen, holding babies in their arms. Some obeyed immediately, others hesitated. Witnesses later described parents crying, begging, unable to move. But armed guards surrounded the pavilion. There was nowhere to run. No road, no police, no rescue, only jungle. And Jim Jones's voice, still speaking through the loudspeakers. Nurses filled syringes. Small children received the poison first. Within moments, some began convulsing, others simply went silent. Parents watched, knowing exactly what would happen next. One woman refused to accept it. Her name was Christine Miller. She stood before hundreds of people and did something almost no one else dared to do. She challenged Jim Jones. Calmly, respectfully, she told him there had to be another way. She said they could still leave, they could still survive, they didn't have to die. For a brief moment, hope returned to the pavilion. Someone, finally, had spoken the words everyone else was too afraid to say. But the crowd turned against her, not because they hated her, because they had spent years believing only one voice mattered. Jim Jones dismissed her. Supporters shouted over her. The moment passed, and history continued toward its ending. A recording of that final meeting still exists today. 44 minutes, every word, every argument, every child crying in the background. You can hear Jim Jones repeating the same message again and again. Don't be afraid. Death is just another step. We've already won. His followers listened, some willingly, some reluctantly, some with tears streaming down their faces. But one after another, they stepped forward, accepted the cup, and drank. Within minutes, the pavilion became almost silent. Children stopped crying. Parents collapsed beside them. Entire families died holding each other. Some were found embracing, others still clutching empty paper cups. By the time the poison reached the last people in line, hundreds already lay motionless on the ground. 909 people died inside Jonestown that afternoon. More than 300 of them were children. It remains the largest single loss of American civilian lives in history until September 11, 2001. When everything was over, Jim Jones was not found beside an empty cup. He had not swallowed the poison he demanded everyone else drink. Instead, investigators found him sitting near the pavilion, a gunshot wound to his head. Whether he pulled the trigger himself or someone else did has never been proven. The man who spent years telling others that death was freedom chose a different ending for himself.